Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Cody, President and founder of Oil and Gas Workers Association. Today, we have State Representative Eric Nelson from Pennsylvania to talk to us about the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Rep. Nelson, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here, Matt.
Hey, we appreciate all you're doing. And, in fact, we supported you in the last election, just threw out an endorsement. And this is exactly why what you're talking about with the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Pennsylvania. Tell us everything you can about it.
Boy, I tell you, and it's tough because we're both embroiled in a political battle and a legal battle. I'm not directly involved in the legal aspect. I'm not an attorney,
Right.
But what's happening in Pennsylvania was former Governor Wolf signed RGGI into effect, that greenhouse gas initiative, through executive order. And he, by that executive order, he directed our DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to develop these regulations, which would join Pennsylvania into RGGI without a legislative vote. It really is a massive overreach of authority, and by our assessment, it violates the Constitution. You just can't sign in at your whim one of the largest energy tax increases Pennsylvania has ever seen.
And that's exactly what it is for a lot of people who don't understand what RGGI is, what the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is. Break it down to us in terms that some of us can understand.
Yeah, well, and it was confusing to me at first because it sounds great, and that's part of the problem with our environmental socialists is that not only are they extremely well funded, but they really coined some smart, welcoming. It looks like you could share RGGI with your kids, but actually it is a devastating program that actually gets to the core of energy production itself. And it's not even a state-controlled entity. It's not even an elected entity. It is its own body that is kind of an amalgamation of different states and boards. And then that board determines how much taxes you should have to pay depending on the carbon impact of the power that you're generating. And so
now I'm gonna ask you a question here. This Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, what does it do about the carbon emissions of China?
It does very little, and I may have to forward you. We're meeting with U.S. Steel, that's really they're a major producer up here.
Yes.
And that when you look at the real world air quality index, which is run by an independent area, and you see what Asia is doing and what China is doing, and they're in red and deep purple, and then you look at Pennsylvania. Through natural free market competition, Pennsylvania already exceeded the Paris Climate Accords that as a country we weren't in. And that is because innovation, new technology, and we have exceptionally clean natural gas, 30% cleaner than Russia's dirty natural gas that they're using to weaponize Europe. But this greenhouse gas initiative has been a slime that has kind of rolled its way down through the northeastern states, and they have their sights set on Pennsylvania, our nation's number 2 largest energy exporter, behind you guys down there in Texas.
You're right. And whenever you bring up Germany, we talk about the EU, we talk about them being left powerless by placing themselves at the mercy of adversaries. Why don't we seem to be able to transfer that lesson to here and say, hey, below below Pennsylvania, Ohio, below our states lies the key to unlocking lower gas prices and lower home heating costs. Why don't we utilize this? Why do people not seem to understand that?
Well, and I think people to me, the average person understands, and even the average business understands low cost energy means a great opportunity for manufacturing and for people and for
Right.
even our seniors or lower income folks to be able to heat their homes, but then there's another set of people that have maybe a broader agenda. And if you have more of a globalist agenda, if you have an agenda that truly believes, I don't care what they do in China because I just want it not to happen here. And
Right.
so they kind of play, it's a dual game. It's a delay game through the courts. It's a delay game within permitting, but RGGI itself will be almost a 40% energy tax. And what it does and what it has demonstrated to do in other New England states is it forces out their heavy industries, because when you tax energy more, the concrete plants, the asphalt plants, the steel manufacturers, those heavy industries, refineries themselves get pushed out because they just can't afford to pay for their power because it comes so much more expensive. It's really
Right.
brutal.
In fact, speaking of power, let's talk about power plants. How will RGGI affect power plants in Pennsylvania? How has it already, maybe compared to Ohio?
And that's an excellent, excellent point, because since that executive order was stroked, into regulation, Pennsylvania has built 0 new power plants. And in fact, we've announced cancellation. Multiple power plants have already closed. Just this year, the Homer City power plant, which was Pennsylvania's largest coal energy producer, that's baseload power, it announced closure. And then we had a $1 billion power plant by Bechtel that was going to be coming in a rural community in Pennsylvania. They were going to assume a site that had been left, so it was town around. $1 billion project, hundreds of thousands of man hours work canceled as a result of these types of programs.
Right. And so whenever you talk about raising taxes on the energy industry, on the oil and gas industry specifically, then what do producers do?
Well, they end up moving, and up here in the Northeast, a lot of them have moved right across the border over into Ohio. Ohio has had 12 power plant announcements since we have been at 0. And so it is they're not involved in RGGI, but they know they're next on the list, because those environmental socialists, they're relentless. They're plotting. And what they do is that incremental attack, never ending, very well funded brutality to really drive our workers out of work.
And I believe that Republicans, Democrats, Independents alike are starting to wake up to the fact that oil and natural gas made right here in the United States is some of the cleanest, most reliable energy in the world. In Pennsylvania, we have the power to bring down gas prices and bring down utility costs for every Pennsylvanian. How do we develop the will to use it?
I think really it's through podcasts like this. It's through programs that are helping to educate people about the truth, and not only just in Pennsylvania or our surrounding states, because we're part of what's referred to as a PJM grid. It's like a multi-state shared electrical purchasing collaborative. But we have a Marcus Hook refinery. Just our national security alone, we saw what happened when Texas got hit hard with that frost,
right?
And it impacted the whole nation for months. If we have the ability, because our stuff is all wrapped in heat coil at our facilities, as a nation, if in the middle of the country, in the South down there with you guys in Texas and Louisiana, and in the Northeast, we were producing and exporting, then our friends in Europe would not be held hostage by thugs that are just turning back their natural gas dial. I mean, Matt, last year we met with officials from the country of Germany. I mean, it was really something. And they said, as a country, that they were making some hard decisions and they were having to decide. Fortunately, the winter was not as bad as what it could have been, and they were having to decide: are we going to have enough energy to heat homes for our people? And part of that contingency plan was that they may have been forced to shut down some of their industries because there wasn't going to be enough gas. And here we are in Pennsylvania. We have a nation that may not be able to heat their people, and we are intentionally denying access to really freedom creating energy on a free market scale. It's almost chilling when you realize the length and the willingness that those environmental socialists have to be able to just impart their will when they're not the ones going cold, they're not the ones losing their jobs, and they're in this buffer zone of kind of that let them eat cake attitude, which
Right.
we really have to confront head on.
You're absolutely right. And even Governor Shapiro ran on the premise of getting rid of RGGI, of pulling Pennsylvania out of RGGI. And we look at how the state of Virginia pulled out just a few years ago. We know that people are waking up to the fact that these policies, like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that they kill jobs, that they raise prices, that they raise home utility costs, and that they hurt the economy. People are of all parties are waking up to that fact. What can Governor Shapiro do right now to support the entire economy of Pennsylvania?
Well, again, another fantastic question, because just this week I learned, which I didn't know, and our building trades didn't know. Some of them did, many of them didn't, that when Governor Shapiro took office, and he did infer he was not a lover of RGGI, and in his inauguration address, he said Pennsylvania would be open for business.
Right.
But at the same time, he was funding and is currently funding the lawyers that are trying to eliminate the stay in Pennsylvania Supreme Court and force about 30% of our power generators closed. So
wow,
he can't have it both ways. You can't, speak in front of building trades and energy workers and say you're hesitant on RGGI, while at the same time in your back pocket you are funding a national law firm, Ballard Spahr. They got an office in Philadelphia, and we're paying the millions of taxpayer dollars to slit our own energy throat. It was really, really disappointing, because, at least to me, I think, Governor Shapiro, he's not of my party, but I truly believe he's somebody who wants to improve Pennsylvania's energy climate. But he also, his top three supporters they don't even live in the state of Pennsylvania. And I think that's an important thing for Texas and for the people all over your podcast to realize that what those environmental socialists are doing is they're adopting a state. So they're sending in huge money to outfund our elections. It's like a 12-1 difference. And his top three donors weren't even from the state of Pennsylvania. So he's got a tightrope, I think, that he has to walk. And that's where, one, he could choose to no longer pay the law firm that's trying to force RGGI across. The next big thing he could do, Matt, and I think there's a very real possibility here, when the courts decide that the way RGGI was implemented in Pennsylvania was unconstitutional, he does not need to appeal that decision.
Agree.
Because that's going to be the real difference maker to where the rubber meets the road. If he says, all right, Supreme Court said this was wrong, we have to do it legislatively, and he could let it drop, and Pennsylvania would go back to work in our industry section.
Absolutely right. So he has all of those options. I think what people in Pennsylvania and in every state across the nation need to understand is that these outside donors, these big money donors who are funding campaigns, they're not the ones who are going to suffer from higher utility costs. They're not the ones who are having to suffer from higher gas prices. They're not the ones who are suffering from, a lack of available good paying jobs and, a higher cost of living. They don't suffer. But with a lack of reliable, affordable energy that oil and natural gas provides, they are the ones who will freeze.
Yes, absolutely. And not only is it hypocritical, but the next chapter is being implemented before our eyes. Because Pennsylvania's energy costs are already going up higher, now there's an increase in government programs that are helping to pay the electric bills and heating costs. We call it LIHEAP here in Pennsylvania. But
Right.
So now more people are having to bend their knee and take money from the government just to be able to make it through a cold winter. And they're doing that because they know once they get you on that dole, then they begin to control you in other areas. And they're using the constriction of energy to take control of people's freedoms. And I know some people may say, well, wait a minute, that seems extreme. They're just trying to help them. And those programs do help, but they hurt at the same time. You know, if we didn't have exceptionally high soaring energy costs that are really climbing out of control here in Pennsylvania, then those folks would not have to bend the knee and have the government pay to heat their homes for them. You know, it takes away from a person when they can't provide for themselves. You know, we're proud here in Pennsylvania, and no one is excited to have to, you know, raise their hand and say, can you please help me make it through the winter? And they're doing it on purpose. You know, it just makes me mad.
You're absolutely right. And it hurts every single person, no matter how they voted. You know, there's not a button whenever we go to the gas pump. There's not a button whenever we pay our utility bills that asks, did you vote for Governor Shapiro or did you vote for Senator Doug Mastriano? There's not a question that says, hey, did you vote for Trump or did you vote for Biden? You don't get those questions. You all pay the same rate. We are all hurting because of a lack of USA oil and gas.
Yeah. And, you know, when Matt, you mentioned now I'm in Pennsylvania, you know, not in DC, but that new rule that Biden's trying to roll out that would just incredibly stringent environmental controls and timelines for zero emissions and penalties, like really, they're trying to squeeze and squash those. When you nationally even say everybody is going to have to do this, it forces all that manufacturing because businesses need reliability, workers need reliability. And when at the federal level and then at our state level, all those conditions are working against you, what do? You pick up shop and you leave the country after we just had, I wish that some of those days were back again, but we went through a phase of onboarding jobs, you know, here in the United States, energy independence. And now we find ourselves in lines to sign up for heating assistance, people losing their jobs. It's a very different outlook, all because of the manipulation and control of restricting energy access.
You're absolutely right. And it can be different. And Governor Josh Shapiro has the potential to act right now. What Josh Shapiro can do right now is stop funding both sides of the war. Stop telling people that you're maybe not so sure about Reggie, while you're funding the lawyers who are fighting to tax energy workers and energy companies and drive up gas prices and home utility costs for every Pennsylvanian.
Yeah. And I mean, really, personally, I think Governor Shapiro has aspirations of maybe taking that next step in office and being able to, you know, to lead and make that hard decision to say, we're going to ensure low cost power and embrace pollution prevention, embrace performance-based environmental programs, embrace hydrogen and carbon capture. There's a way for the United States to continue to be a world dominant leader. If we're not making it here and manufacturing it here, most other country of the world, it's not as clean. Like if you are a supporter of global environmental responsibility, then we would want to manufacture those products. I mean, I've been deployed overseas. I think you've been around the block. You know what manufacturing looks like in a third world country, you know? And going back to that fresh air index, we can see the consequence of large scale manufacturing in nations that do not share the same commitment that America does when it comes to the environment. But yet we seem to just be comfortable clubbing each other over the head instead of saying, wow, you know, we put all those scientists to work to continue to improve. But if you really wanted to do more for the earth, then we should be doing it here in the United States, all over the United States.
Excellent point to end on. Just a final note to Governor Josh Shapiro. If what State Rep Eric Nelson just said is true, and if you have ambitions of a higher office, you have an opportunity right now to prove that you actually care about Pennsylvanians and all Americans, and pull Pennsylvania out of RGGI, out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Or you can show right now that you're just beholden to big money donors who don't actually care about Pennsylvanians. Rep Nelson, thank you for joining us today here on Oil and Gas Workers Association's podcast. Any final thoughts?
No, it's great. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the support and what you're doing for the oil and gas workers here in America. Keep it up.
We appreciate you. Thank you very much. My name is Matt Cody. You can find us at OGWAUSA.com, and you've got to check out some other videos from Pennsylvania State Rep Eric Nelson at OGWAUSA.com/Marcellus. Thank you for joining us. God bless you all.
See you, Matt.